Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Contract at Commander podcast. I'm Mike Almond, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Alex Lapp. Alex, what's up, man?
Not too much, Mike, but it's an interesting card you got there. Can I see that?
I mean, yeah, but only if I can see the one that you got.
I brought a few.
What is that?
I brought a few cards that our listeners may have never heard of before, and if they have, congrats, because these are some of the cards in our wheelhouse: the Social Contract, political, group hug, stacks, symmetric effects, chaos, all that good stuff. But these are cards that no one is playing, Mike.
Yeah, these are, and not just ones that we're talking about. We put it out there into the interwebs. You know, we asked on the podcast itself. We put it out on Twitter. We asked our Discord, hey, what are some cards that kind of fit into, you know, this niche that we've built for ourselves? Which I say niche, but really it's these different types of archetypes that we play. But the whole point is table involvement.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's less
having a good time. Yeah.
Exactly. We want to just make sure that it's fun, right? And we got a good amount of responses, and we're going to get to those.
We got some cards that I've never heard of before, and that's, I think, some of the most fun. Right. Like, that's, I think, one of the most enjoyable aspects of playing Commander is, since we have these 25,000 plus cards in our back catalog, that there's almost like this mysterious uncovered library of cards that people know exist in theory. They were printed in sets, but they're lost to the ages. And being able to see a card that you've never seen before, we've been playing the game for years, that's such a joy for me, Mike.
Absolutely. And you got to keep in mind, like, and maybe you don't have to keep this in mind because, you know, you're pretty present about it, but everybody knows with all of the new cards that come up, there's spoiler releases. There's a whole lot of, oh, this fits really well on this. And there's talk about all of the cards that are coming up. That's not how it used to go
back in the day.
Right.
Before I started playing in the 90s, they didn't have, well, the internet didn't exist for the first few years of Magic's life. And even when the internet did start to exist, using it for wide distribution of notifying people about Magic cards is not really happening. So back in the day, it was Duelist Magazine that would list these cards, and oftentimes they didn't even have pictures, Mike.
Right. I think that's a good fallback for us at some point. If we're ever really struggling for an episode idea, you and I would just do
issues of Duelist Magazine.
Well, I was going to say that, or we could just go back to like sets that were, you know, 15, 20 years old at this point and do like a release, like a spoiler, and here are the cards that we like for that.
Because Prophecy was like famously critically panned because it has all these weird social cards and Commander didn't exist. But now we can look back on it and we see like, oh, look at all these weird cards that are Group Hug 20 years before they created Group Hug.
We should do that. I was sitting here, it's like, oh, we could do the exact same thing we just did.
We'll talk about that another time.
But that's cool. Yeah, let's get into the get into the cards now.
Yeah.
Well, not now, but the cards from then for. Here we go. Alex, we're going to start with some of the ones that you brought in, and one that is near and dear to my heart, because this was actually the main card in the first Magic deck I ever built.
Yeah.
And why don't you go ahead and talk to me about Exhume?
Oh, gosh, I love Exhume. Mike, Exhume is a sorcery for 1 and a black that's 2 mana. Each player puts a creature card from their graveyard onto the battlefield. Oh, I love it. Mike, this card...
It's nuts.
This card is in 1% of all Black Plus decks, 4,500 decks. And let's talk about what the usual rate is for reanimation. Mike, it's usually 5 converted mana. Now, this is 2, so right off the bat, massive discount. And the downside is that we also get to give everyone else a creature reanimation. Like, what more could you possibly want? This card is incredible.
I think one of the things that gets missed on this a lot of the time is because it's 2 mana, this can be a turn 2, turn 3 kind of play.
Entomb turn 1, Exhume turn 2.
I don't understand how this ever misses the mark with people, because
this could be like a competitive level card.
It really could be. Yeah. Because if you have a way to mill your deck, or if you have a way to, like you said, entomb or bury it alive or something along those lines where, okay, maybe you're playing this on turn 4, but the ability to say, hey, I'm going to get the best creature out of deck and onto the battlefield in the first 4 or 5 turns. And somebody else, unless they're playing the exact same style as me, maybe they get a Sakura Tri-Builder.
Yeah,
it's really good for you, and it can be a cool card for everybody. Hey, you know what, everybody? Bring out your baddest boy. Let's go.
I think that's where group hug cards start to become very powerful. These symmetric effects that they're symmetric on the card, but the way that you play them allows you to gain that big advantage. You were ready with part of your library mildew. You discarded a big creature. Not everyone else was ready.
No. It's such a good card, and it was one of those things when you brought it up in the Discord, I'm like, Alex, I don't know if you know my affection for this card.
Oh, that's the best thing.
It was great, because that was my terrible legacy deck. That was turn 1, careful study to discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards, and exhume next turn to try and put out a freaking monster out there.
It was phenomenal. So fun. This card was originally printed in Urza's Saga in 1998.
Yep. And look at us going back.
At that time, it was a common, and it's since been reprinted several times as an uncommon.
And yet, not nearly put out there enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, last time it was in Jumpstart, and this is still hovering around $1. This is an incredible card for $1. I'd pick this one up for sure.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and move on to our next one here. Alex, another one from you, Tangleroot. 3 generic mana for an artifact that says whenever a player plays a creature spell, that player adds green to their mana pool.
Wow.
This is just a good return on value. This is, hey, everybody, throw everything out there. Let's go. I like this one a lot. Talk to me more about this card, Alex.
Sure, Mike. This card was printed in Mirrodin back in 2003 as a rare, but it's a 78-cent rare, and if we look at the analysis on EDHREC, for some reason, Mike, this is only in 600 decks. That's 0% of green decks. And the value on this is just phenomenal. If we think about mana rocks sitting at around 3, right? Maybe 2, maybe 3. It depends on
2 is what we want to lean into, but 3 you can get away with it if it's
3
something
with upside, because this is not a mana rock. This is better than a mana rock, because this is a discounting or refunding effect, which means that it can happen multiple times. Let's say you're playing a low to the ground green deck like Elves, something like that. Now, every time you play a 1 mana, 2 mana elf, you're getting a mana back.
Right.
And everyone else loves this because everyone just loves getting free mana, even if they're not actually taking as much advantage of it as you can. It doesn't matter. People just like free things. And this is phenomenal.
It leans into our group hug aesthetic as far as, hey, everybody's going to be able to benefit. You're just going to be able to benefit more.
This is like
you're building around it. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's nice to get that return on value immediately if you are low to the ground kind of deck like you're talking about, or if you're playing an EDHREC deck or something where it's like, no, I need to get as much value out of this as possible. Tulane would be another. Like, there's definitely ways where this card can be really powerful, and it can also be fun. And I think that's kind of what we try and lean into as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Maybe a little bit less fun in like what I think it sounds like, but a fun card as far as the text. Why don't you talk to me about Psychic Surgery?
Sure, Mike. Psychic Surgery is a really interesting card. It's kind of like a tutor hate, which I think is a really interesting, I would call this a stacks piece or a silver bullet piece. Psychic Surgery is 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent shuffles their library, you may look at the top 2 cards of that library. You may exile one of those cards, then put the rest on top of that library in any order. So we're talking any tutor effect, and there's a lot of them that put the card on top of the library instead of the hand to save some mana cost. And then they'll be shuffling their library before they put that card on top. When that happens, this card is going to trigger, and you basically get to say, all right, is this tutor card gonna be the next card you draw, or is it going to exile and you never see it again?
I think I like leaning harder into cards that if I play them, it's going to disrupt other people's plans, but it would feel really, really bad for them to use a card to remove it. And
yeah, why would you want to remove this?
Psychic Surgery feels like one of those cards where the only person who wants to remove it is the combo deck that has to tutor to get this piece to make this thing work, to make this thing work, and you just dismantle their engine with this. And even then, even though you are basically taking their strategy out of the game with this one card, it would still feel really bad to have to disenchant this.
Yeah, because it's a 2-mana enchantment. Yeah. This one came out in New Phyrexia 2011 as a rare, and it's 35 cents. EDHREC says this card is in 0% of blue decks, 1,100 decks. This is some pretty powerful tutor hate. We've talked about my Silver Bullet deck, but you don't
Your
have
Kaikar
to be
deck,
running. Yeah, exactly, Kaikar. You don't have to be running a Silver Bullet deck to adjust your deck to your meta. And if your meta includes people playing all these powerful tutor effects, well, you can ask them not to, or you can start running this anti-tutor stuff, and this is a real winner.
We actually had a question in Discord recently, and this kind of ties into it, about, hey, I feel like my play group is subtly starting to increase in power.
Mm-hmm, the arms race.
Yeah, and what are some ways to kind of, discourage that or do something different? And we threw a couple of our standbys out there, but you can also just make a deck where the entire thing is, okay, I'm going to slow down all of the crazy stuff you guys want to do without being super stacksy. Like, I guess this is a stacks piece.
Oh, this is definitely a stacks piece.
But as far as I can tell, it's much more like, it's not stopping somebody from being able to play Magic.
Not all stacks pieces are about that hard lock.
Yeah.
A lot of stacks pieces are about, okay, this specific kind of value is now against the rules.
Okay. You know what? I think I'm going to be leaning into that a little bit more as we talk about a few more of these cards, because some of them are stacks pieces that I'm like, I somehow don't hate this. Something has changed within me. Let's go ahead and talk about our next card here. You brought up a fun, janky artifact creature, so of course we're going to talk about it. Talk to me about Jangling Automaton.
Oh my gosh. Jangling Automaton is perhaps one of the silliest cards in Magic. Came out back in Weatherlight. That was 97. Jangling Automaton is a 3-mana artifact creature, 3 generic mana. Construct, 3/2. Whenever Jangling Automaton attacks, untap all creatures defending player controls. Now, back when Weatherlight came out, Mike, this was supposed to be like, oh my god, you're getting a 3/2 for 3 in an artifact creature? What a value. We better slap that massive downside on there of untapping all creatures defending player controls. Yeah, but now that Group Hug exists, now that Commander exists, now we can do this deal. Like, okay, maybe someone else has a stacks piece keeping things tapped down. Maybe the player next to you is about to alpha strike that player, but they've already tapped out to try to do a crackback.
Right.
Whatever they're doing, for whatever reason, untapping an opponent's permanence at your leisure is a very powerful effect.
Maybe there's an ability on a creature or something along those lines.
Activated ability. Yeah.
And just, again, having on board the ability to make a deal, to have a conversation at the table.
It's like donating a Sword of Feast and Famine almost.
It kind of, in a way, because this is creatures defending player controls.
It is creatures.
So it's and that's where I lean into it being powerful, right? Because this is another one of those things where, because it isn't overly powerful, it's not give somebody an untap step. It's untap somebody's creatures, which means that it does something useful, but it's not so scary or threatening that it's immediately going to be targeted. That said, my favorite card, I want to put an assault suit on this. I just wanted to go around the table. Hilarious. Now, that means you're never going to get the benefit because it can't attack you.
Right.
But I like the idea of like...
deck and goad it.
Exactly. Yeah. Goad it and then put an assault suit on it and everybody's just untapping all the time.
This might be the single rarest, most... I've never heard of that card that we talk about today. This card is in 54 decks. 0% of all decks.
It's pretty good. Pretty good.
You pick this one for nothing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about another artifact creature that you had brought up then. This is one you've talked to me about before, and it might have been on the podcast, but I mean, we're doing the full episode on it, and there's still not enough of this. There's still not enough of this artifact creature out there. Talk to me about Soldevi Sentry.
Mike, this is one of my favorite creatures of all time. When we talk about 1/1s for 1 with upside, this is the big one. I love it. Soldevi Sentry is 1 generic for an artifact creature soldier. It's a 1/1 with the best activated ability on any 1/1 I've ever seen. 1 generic mana, choose target opponent, regenerate Soldevi Sentry. When it regenerates this way, that player may draw a card. Mike.
Mm-hmm.
A 1 mana 1/1 where you can just donate cards to people who desperately need them by chump blocking with a 1/1.
Yep. It's it's the least powerful, most powerful wall of all time.
It's phenomenal. This card came out in Alliances back in 96, and it was a common. Right now it's 11 cents. Nobody plays this thing. EDHREC says it's in 184 decks, 0%.
Now, in case anybody out there isn't as enthused as you are about this card, let's also reiterate here. You can regenerate multiple times, right?
You can. There would need to be multiple lethal damage instances.
Sure. So one of my favorite things to do with this is you put out a Pyrohemia. And just, okay, great. I'm going to ping it. I'm going to pay 1, regenerate it. You can draw a card. And this stays around. And just keep doing it. If you've got a ping effect, if you've got this awesome chump blocker, there's ways to just make this stick around.
Absolutely.
And be useful. And that's kind of I think that's actually our flavor. It sticks around and is useful.
That's a good point with that question, Mike. Let's talk about what regenerate is real quick.
Yeah, mini judge's corner.
Absolutely. Regenerate, we like to think of it as a shield. It's a static ability that says the next time this creature, this permanent, would be destroyed, whether through a destroy effect or through taking lethal damage, instead, tap it and remove all damage marked on it. So it doesn't have to be untapped to regenerate, but it does have to take lethal damage or be destroyed.
Right. There you go. So it's again, it leans into it's not overly powerful, but
no, not at all.
You can definitely do some really good things with a 1 mana 1/1 with upside that's colorless mana. So it can go in anything.
I'm just shocked, Mike, that this isn't a group hug staple. It's a colorless card. It's 11 cents. It draws your opponent's cards. It's a 1 mana 1/1. Like, nobody plays this? This is incredible.
It is a good card. It is a good card. Get it in some decks. Let us know if you get it in any decks, because you should. Speaking about a card that should go into some decks, Goo. Let's talk about our last one from you specifically with Parallel Evolution.
Oh, yeah.
3 generic, green for a sorcery. For each creature token in play, its controller puts a creature token into play that's a copy of that creature, and it has flashback for 4 generic, green. Someone needs to help me understand something.
Yeah.
This is a sorcery that specifically targets tokens. It has flashback, so it can do it again. This is second harvest with flashback for the table.
Yes.
Why is this not in a lot of decks?
Well, I would say symmetric, right? Symmetric cards people tend to shy away from, even though their value is phenomenal. Number 2, this is the first card we've talked about that's actually pretty expensive. The original printing of this is $16. You can get it on the list for $4.50, which is much cheaper.
Okay, that's better.
That's not within everybody's range for their deck.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. The symmetric get me though, because it's not for each creature; it's each creature token. So you'd have to be playing against somebody who's also playing tokens,
right? But people don't think about that, Mike. They don't think about the fact that these cards that are symmetric, with scare quotes, the fact that you're running them means that you already have ways to break parity without even trying. For example, by running a green token deck.
Sure. I guess. It's a good card. Like the budget concern, that is a total concern. I get that. But there's a lot of expensive cards in Magic that are used way more than this that aren't as good as this, as far as I'm concerned. If you're in a token deck and you can play Second Harvest for the table for 1 more mana and have the option to cast it from your graveyard later, that's insane. I've got Second Harvest in a deck.
Yeah, Second Harvest I find is a little bit win more, a little bit. But
yeah.
This is, I think I would take this over Second Harvest pretty much every day of the week.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, I have Second Harvest in a deck, and heck, I don't know how much Second Harvest costs, but if I can trade it in and get close to the $4.55 list price, I'm going to do that for a deck, because this is a very cool card, so thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Oh, for sure. This card came out in Torment back in 2002, and funnily enough, Scryfall says that this one card from Torment is 10% of the value of the entire set.
Wow.
Which I guess there's not really a lot of winners in Torment, huh?
I guess not. And this card is 10% of the total value, and it's not a whole lot of decks.
EDHREC says this is in 1,300 decks, 0% of green decks. Mike, my gosh, green doesn't mind spending 7 mana on Flashback for a sorcery, and goodness gracious, I know there are a lot of our listeners who love green. Green loves tokens, and tokens love making more tokens. Run this card.
Before, just so we don't get any feedback on it. Well, not feedback, but any clapback on it. Second Harvest being an instant, yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
This is more fun. Do it twice. Do it for the table. Woo! So thank you for bringing these cards to our attention, Alex.
Of course.
Let's talk about some cards that other people out in the Twitter sphere and Discord sphere and all the have brought to our attention. Let's go ahead and start with one. We mentioned stacks pieces and me getting a little bit more comfortable with them. NATO verb. I'm not sure. I'm going to say everybody's names like 2 or 3 times in here and hope that I get one of them right. But NATO verb on Twitter recommended a really interesting one to us called Portcullis. Alex, walk me through this card.
Yeah, Mike, I know this card well because this is a CEDH level stacks piece. I've had this card played against me before. Portcullis is a 4 mana artifact from Stronghold. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if there are 2 or more other creatures on the battlefield, exile that creature. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control when Portcullis leaves the battlefield. Mike, that's a lot of fancy text. What that means is, if there are 2 creatures on the battlefield, any other creature that ETBs immediately gets exiled. This is one of those classic stacks pieces that will shut down the board. Any creature strategy that doesn't have artifact removal cannot deal with this. This is absolutely devastating.
It's Voltron's biggest dream.
You might play it for your deck and not think like this will benefit my deck. For everyone else, they're like, "Oh my god, my game is over."
Yeah, there are, and that was the problem with it when I was looking at it. This is a stacks piece. I'm like, oh, okay,
this one's really powerful.
This is really powerful, but this enables a lot of my strategies that are Voltron itself is not inherently an awesome strategy.
No,
there's really a lot of there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I like it, but this is one of those cards I'm like, oh my gosh, if I put this in there and I play it at the right time.
Yeah, everyone else is in big trouble.
I'm great. My Voltron is going to go out there for a while. Cool, let's do this.
No chump blockers.
But then you get into the whole, but this also absolutely, like you said, it can shut down decks.
Yeah. When you're running this, that's fine, right? Because stacks is an important part of the game. You just need to be aware that this card for creature strategies is an almost impassable wall. It must be removed. And because of that, people playing those decks are going to hate on you immediately. So just be ready for that, Mike. This came out in Stronghold. It's in 493 decks. 0% of all decks. Stronghold was 98. And this card is real cheap for a rare from Stronghold, $2.40. This might become the most powerful card in your deck, and no one is playing it.
So I have one clarification judge question for you then.
Yeah.
So it's whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if there are 2 or more other creatures that you exile. So does it still get to enter the battlefield?
It does.
So you still get ETBs.
You do.
Then
and you get
Portcullis
LTBs.
exiles it.
Yeah. You get ETB and LTB, yes.
So if there's a way to blink Portcullis, does that mean that you get the ability to have things enter the battlefield, get exiled under Portcullis, Portcullis gets removed, and then all of these other creatures return to the battlefield, they ETB, they LTB, and then when Portcullis comes, like I've got this idea for a stupid deck that won't work, but it'll do powerful nothing.
You added another loop in there where it's not quite happening. Portcullis, if you were to remove it, just like with our Detention Sphere, with our Fiend Hunter, all those other white exile effects where they exile under, right? So you remove that, they all come back. But when you put Portcullis back in, nothing gets exiled right away, right? Because this is a triggered ability. It's only looking to see if the requisite number of creatures are on the battlefield. So anything that's already on the battlefield is safe from Portcullis when it ETBs. And then everything new gets exiled.
So it's not as awesome as I thought. It's just extremely awesome. Oh no.
Well,
it's a good card.
What's really interesting is you can use this with a mass blink effect, and that mass blink effect becomes a mass exile effect.
Oh.
Right.
It sure does.
Because this is on the field. You say, okay, all the creatures on the battlefield, LTB and ETB. And whoops. Everything that just...
Everybody go in the gate.
Everything that left comes back, and then it gets exiled.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool card. Cool card. Thank you very much, Nataverb. Natoverb.
Great recommendation. Just be real careful with this one.
I think that's going to be my new thing. I'm just going to do my best to get the name right once and then wrong as many times as possible.
I'm sure they're just happy you're saying their name over and over.
Well, speaking of, next one is from Owen Batista. That's Vlad Viewer. Vlad Viever. Owen gave us a really cool card that I've got in a couple of decks. Unspeakable Symbol. I think we've talked about this a little bit just because. Yes. But let's talk about it again.
I had never seen this one before.
Oh, well, then I'm so happy to talk to you about this, buddy. 1 generic black for an enchantment. Pay 3 life. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature.
Oh my god.
Here's the thing. I think you forgot this because there's no way we got through our Piru deck tech without me bringing up this
card. Did we
talk
about this? Did we do a Piru deck tech and talk about this and I forgot?
I think so, and if not, I
listeners,
apologize for all my failings.
Correct us. Correct us in Discord and on Twitter. Mike.
This is such a good card,
oh my
Alex.
God. I see this card and I immediately think of other extremely powerful life conversion cards like what's that one?
Bolus Citadel, Kirk. Like there's a bunch of really cool ones. This is in my Liaisa deck. The specific life gain deck where at any time it's out, players lose 2 life anytime they cast a spell. Because that deck is all about manipulating life totals for everybody. And then because the commander specifically has lifelink and is a 5/5 flying lifelink, great. I'm going to pump that thing up and get back a whole bunch of... It is a very cool deck for a whole bunch of different things. It's good if you are basically going to try and swing out with 1 big unblockable creature. It's good if you are doing the effects where if you pay life, you get really good benefits. It's good for just targeting stuff because even if you're not playing any of those strategies, if you need one of your opponents to do 4 more damage to take out the arch enemy, you have the ability to do so.
This thing has 1,000,001 uses, Mike. You can use this to save creatures from pings and damage from disfavorable combat strategies where somebody pulls out a combat trick or it's a bad block and you can say, hey, you can make this block, it'll live.
Right.
Mike, this, like, having pay 3 life do anything as an activated ability with no tap at instant speed, repeated as many times as you want. The card I was thinking of that's quite similar to this, Treasonous Ogre, right? Where you can pay 3 life and get a red mana.
Mm-hmm.
This is, obviously it's not quite that strong, but this has a lot more political applications.
Sure.
This card came out back in Scourge in 2003 and was an uncommon. Right now it's about $3. And let's see what EDHREC says about this. This is only in 1% of all black decks.
Yep. What is the commander? What's the legendary creature that whenever you target a creature, you destroy that creature?
Mike, the card you're thinking of is Horobi Death's Wail. For 2 black, a legendary creature spirit of 4/4 with flyer. Whenever a creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, destroy that creature. Mike, 3 life.
Hey, 3 life, destroy target creature.
Oh my God.
Like, the value is ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Here's the thing, and I feel silly, because we've been doing this for a good amount of time, right? Not just this podcast, but talking about these kind of cards. This is something we've done basically since we started talking to each other, right? This is one of those cards that I knew about, and I liked, and I thought it was kind of underplayed. I didn't realize it was criminally underplayed
this card
until we brought this up.
It's in less than 5,000 decks. Even though +1/+1 counters is one of the most popular strategies in the entire game.
Yep. You know what? Great job, Owen. Great job.
This is so awesome.
All right. Last one from Twitter. There's this young up-and-comer named Dana Roach.
Oh, my gosh.
Who gave us a couple of different ones. And the one that we picked is... Well, frankly, it's value in white. So obviously, it's where I'm going to lean. Why don't you talk to me about Patrician Scorn?
Sure. Before I say that, Mike is just kidding. Of course, Dana Roach is the esteemed editor from EDHREC. He's on the EDHREC cast, and he also has the CMDR Central podcast. Dana Roach
I went to go hang out with.
Venerable member of our community, and Mike was just on his podcast. Yeah. Go listen to it. The link's in the show notes.
We defended Group Hug, and I found out that it was a war on many fronts, but it's okay.
It really is. Dana's an interesting guy to talk to because he's a very agreeable guy, but boy, does he hate Group Hug.
That's all right. I think we swayed him a little bit, but this is a card that
Patrician Scorn.
I don't care what you're playing. It's got some interest.
This is something interesting. 3 and a white for an instant. If you've cast another white spell this turn, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. Pretty much whatever comes after that almost doesn't even matter, but it's destroy all enchantments. Yeah. So board wipes that cost 0 mana, regardless of how many hoops you have to jump through, and this isn't even that big of a hoop at all, frankly. Wow. Destroy all enchantments for 0 mana at instant speed and discard a card, basically.
Yep.
And
this can be a 1 mana path to exile a creature.
Oh yeah.
And destroy all enchantments. Here's the thing. I don't love 4 total mana for instant speed destroy all enchantments. But that's
You're never paying that. Yeah.
But that's not terrible. Like, even if that's the downside, that's still decent.
Yeah.
You're never paying it.
You're never paying it. This is 0 mana. This came out on Future Sight 2007. It's a 25-cent common, a 0 mana board wipe for 25 cents. EDHREC says this card is in 200 decks, 0%. Mike, how does a 0 mana instant speed board wipe end up in 200 decks?
The only thing I can think of is, well, white likes to play lots of enchantments.
Well, sure.
And even then, cool. Like, that's not a good enough reason.
It's a pretty restrictive board wipe, right? Like, you only destroying enchantments is something
you don't have that variability. Yeah.
So if you're playing a white deck and it's not an enchantment-based deck, I think you just throw this in there every time. Because it's going to break parity because you're not running enchantments. It's 0 mana. What excellent first of all, most board wipes are sorcery speed. Almost all of them, frankly. This one is instant speed, and it costs nothing, to reiterate.
Yep. It's good job, Dana.
Good pick, Dana.
It's like you know a lot about Magic. Everybody, go listen to Dana's stuff. While you're doing that, well, I mean, do that later because you're going to want to stick around. We're going to be right back. We are going to talk about some of the cards that actually came from our Discord server. Very proud of our nerdy fam in there because holy cow, there are some really cool cards, and we're going to get back to them right after this. And we're back, and we got a lot of cards to talk about. Thank you very much for our Discord fam. If you want to come in, hey, great. Water's fine. We talk about really cool cards, like all the ones we're about to talk about. Yeah, and you can click on the link in our show notes, and it'll take you right there. Have a whole bunch of fun. You want to talk to Alex about all of the different, judge questions that I do because you have much smarter judge questions than I do? Totally great. Come on in. Let's go ahead and start with Clockwork 12 here because they mentioned them on Twitter as well, but they're in our Discord server, and they gave me 3 that I was pretty excited about, and I'm glad you picked them. Let's go ahead and start with Everlasting Torment, Alex.
Oh, yeah. Mike, Everlasting Torment's an enchantment for 2 in Rakdos. That's hybrid black-red, 3 mana total. For an enchantment, players can't gain life. Also, damage can't be prevented. Oof. Also, all damage is dealt as though its source had Wither. Wither means that when this creature deals damage to a creature, it deals that damage in the form of -1/-1 counters. Mike, this card's from Shadowmoor.
Okay.
That was back in 2008, and it's $2. It's a stacks piece, and this card is in less than 1,500 decks, 1%. Mike, this is... Wow. If you're doing any kind of group slug, burn, any kind of punishing deck style, yeah. Can't is the most powerful word in Magic, so can't get life means there's no way they're getting life. Damage can't be prevented means that unless it's some other kind of getting around it, like your life total can't change, then can't be prevented. Fogs don't work. And then all damage is Wither, which can't be prevented, so... Wither is kind of like Infect, except it's only the part of
only
Infect
on
that creatures.
Right.
And all that for 3 mana.
I'm just sitting here and it's just like, if this isn't in every Obosh deck, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, this is
because, okay, great. Players can't gain life. Damage can't be prevented. All cool. Also, I don't care what indestructible exists.
Yeah, no kidding.
Everything's getting -1/-1s. This is a really cool card. It's for an effect like that. Man, 3 mana. It just seems like that's a good price. That's a good price for what you want to do in decks that care about people taking damage or losing life or think. I like this card a lot.
Yeah, this is a powerful hate piece, and I think it'd be right at home in a lot of Rakdos decks.
It's really, really strong. And like you said, group slug, damage pieces, anything along those lines, really good. Moving on to our next one from Clockwork 12 here, we have Bonds of Mortality. This is a 1 generic and a green enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Great, replaces itself. And you can pay a green. Creatures your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This seems useful.
I think the closest analog here is Shadowspear, which is a 1 mana legendary artifact equipment from Theros Beyond Death, and it's an equipment that says equipped creature is +1/+1 trample and lifelink, and then it has the activated ability to pay 1 permanents your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. That's exactly this clause. Except, Mike, that card costs $18. And this card costs 24 cents.
And let's be real. It's a better card.
It is. It's much better.
It's not as narrow.
It's in colorless.
However,
this cantrips.
This is cantrip, and it's good.
Yeah.
For 1 green to be able to remove hexproof and indestructible, that's really useful.
Yeah,
and
that
again,
opens up the board to removal, to board wipes.
For everyone. For everyone. It's rare
some of
that
these effects say it's only for you.
Yeah. It's really rare that you're ever going to be in a situation where you're playing this and all 3 of your opponents are dealing with indestructible stuff, But that doesn't mean that this isn't ever going to have a place, even if it's just an Enchantress deck. A 2-mana enchantment that has some upside and draws you a card. Great. I mean, there are a couple enchantments that I pay that I'll play in an Enchantress deck that don't really do anything for me, but they're a cheap enchantment, so they build on the engine that I'm trying to do things with. This at least has some upside, and it cantrips itself. I like this card.
Yeah, Mike. This is back from Oath of the Gatewatch. It's an uncommon from 2016, and it's 24 cents. It's only in 2,100 green decks, 1%. And I mean, how many times have you been at a table and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, we have to deal with the archenemy, right? But oh my god, they have Avacyn, they have privileged position, they have some effect that is making their board untouchable. We can't do anything."
You mean that? And just how many times do you get how many times do all the cogs in your brain start turning the second that you see someone play their, sit down and, oh, this is my commander, and it's one of the indestructible gods, and you say,
yeah,
I've only got 2 ways in my deck to be able to deal with that. I hope I get them, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to stop whatever they're doing. This is a cool.
How about scary?
It's a cool way.
OG Narset, Enlightened Master.
Oh, sure.
Hexproof.
Sure.
That's a dangerous commander, but you can spot remove it with this.
Good card. Last one from Clockwork 12 here. So far, 2 for 2, and I'm going to go ahead and call it. It's 3 for 3, because this is a card I've brought up before because I love it and I want to make it work. Power Matrix. 4 generic for an artifact. Tap. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying, first strike, and trample until end of turn. So this is 4 generic mana for target creature becomes Voltron. It gives
flying,
all sorts of abilities.
Trample is
really good.
That creature's going through.
Yeah. Tell me how it's getting stopped.
Yeah. This reminds me of things like Rogue's Passage. You're making a creature unblockable.
Yeah. You can still block this one. It's just going to be difficult.
Yeah, good luck with that. Flying and trample is a difficult combination.
I'm just sitting here trying to understand, wait, you couldn't add Menace? At that point, just do it, But this is a great card. I like that everyone's playing Voltron type of stuff. I like that thing is you have a creature that when it hits, it does something cool. We're going to enable it to hit. I'm all for that in just about every way. And this is a really, 4 mana it's a chunk. You know what I mean?
It is, but once it's out, it's every turn.
It's out.
It's like, what do you call it? Like Duelist Heritage. It's just that it's just there now. Rattlesnake combat trick that say, any attack can become devastating.
Exactly. And, it's 4 mana, but you have it then, and you have it for the rest of the game. Like you said, I'm a big fan of it. I like this card. Clockwork, I think he did a really good job.
Yeah, it's a rare from Mercadian Masks, and this is not a cheap one. It's between $7 and $10. It's only in 532 decks, 0% of decks. And this card is sitting in my trade binder.
It's one of those things that, the only thing I could see anybody having a real issue with it, it's a $10 card, so fair. It's 4 mana. Well, if you're playing a deck that cares about pumping up creatures, you're probably okay with that. Mm-hmm. And if you're in an equipment-based deck, you're probably reducing a bunch of your artifacts' costs anyway.
If you're playing this as an artifact deck, you're probably reanimating this for nothing.
No, there you go. You can do that too. There's a lot of reasons that these cards work. We like them. Good job, Clockwork. we're going to move on to, man, this is going to be the hardest one that I've got. It's Parature and Reaper at the same time. So I'm going to say Paratrooper, Paratrooper. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to edit any of that out because I like the card and I like the name. So you can look at me, be silly. Talk to me about Liar's Pendulum, Alex.
Mike, Liar's Pendulum is one of the silliest and most interesting cards that has ever been printed. You would almost be surprised that it's in black border because to me, this could be a silver border card and I wouldn't even blink. Liar's Pendulum is a 1 mana artifact from Mirrodin. Pay 2 and tap, choose a card name, target opponent guesses whether a card with that name is in your hand. You may reveal your hand. If you do and your opponent guess draw a card. Mike, this is a very silly card, but oh so flavorful, oh so fun. This would go in your Sphinx deck to be on theme. This goes in your mono white deck to help you draw cards. This goes in your silly deck because it's forcing an opponent to play a game with you. And this does have, it's like a gambit. You do actually have to think when you're naming this card. Do you want to convince your opponent that you have it or that you don't have it? This is not an easy decision to make. Mike, this card is so much fun. It's only 27 cents, a rare from Mirrodin. And on EDHREC, it's in 168 decks or 0%. Mike, talk to me more about Liar's Pendulum.
So here's the thing. I love this card because at worst, it's a 1 mana artifact. For every time you get an opportunity, you can pay 2, and there's a 50-50 shot or so that you're going to be able to draw a card.
I think you can influence those odds.
But you can, that's what I'm saying. At worst, it's 50-50. Right. You can absolutely make some deals. You can play around with this. Because you can even just say forest.
Yeah.
Well, do I have a land or not? Mm-hmm. Do this before your land drop. You know, there's a plenty of ways that you can manipulate your chances on this card, and it's just so dang silly. I love 1 mana artifacts that do something neat.
This is one of the most a very unique cards. Like, sure, there are other cards that involve naming a card in an opponent's hand. But those are typically in decks that intend to have telepathy style effects that let you peek into opponent's hands, or hand attack style effects that let you look at someone's hand and remove a card from it. This card does not demand that you play that kind of deck, and it's also colorless. Mike, this card is so delightful. I wish there were more cards that were silly like this.
It's silly, but it can be effective.
It's functional. 2 mana is the value for a card in white and colorless. It just is.
Yep. I'll take it. Good job, Paratrooper. That actually might be it. Either way. Let's go ahead and move on to I'm not going to get this name wrong. Used car salesman in our Discord who gave us 2 different cards. One of them we've talked about before for good reason, so we'll start with that. How about Lifeline, Alex?
Oh, yeah, Mike. This is one of my favorite cards in the whole game. Lifeline is the 5 mana artifact. Whenever a creature dies, if another creature is on the battlefield, return the first card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Mike,
so good.
This is mass reanimation for the table, by the table. It's on the reserve list, and it's $34. But if we look at EDHREC, like, wow, it must be in a lot of decks if it costs that much. It's not even in 1,000 decks.
Nope.
This is one of the most powerful cards. Like, you look at this card and you're like, wow, that sounds pretty good. I've played this in my Sekuar reanimation deck. This ended the game.
Yeah. Because, again, the only threshold is if there is a creature on the battlefield.
Yeah.
If something stays,
so
everything else dies, but it comes back.
Full and perfect board wipe that hits everything and nothing survived. Which most board wipes can't pull that off.
Yeah. You need a toxic deluge, or somebody needs to have we just referred to it, everlasting torment out and withering.
But like where this really works is in
so
these
good.
aristocrat sacrifice reanimation decks where you can sacrifice at instant speed on the end step and immediately get it back, get the ETB and sack it again. Yep. Mike, this card is insane.
Yep. It's
one of the best cards.
It really is. I need to just bite
it's so expensive though, and it's going to keep going up in price because it is on the reserve list.
On the reserve list.
It's never going to get printed again. If this sounds even remotely fun to you, you should buy it now because the price will only go up.
Or what do we always say?
Proxy it.
Let's talk about a less expensive but just as disruptive, more disruptive. I'm not sure. But the other one that we got from Used Car Salesman is Title Control. So this is one blue enchantment with a cumulative upkeep of 2. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an age counter on this permanent, then sacrifice it unless you pay its upkeep cost for each age counter on it. So first upkeep after you play it, it's going to be 2 generic mana. Second upkeep after that, it's going to be 4 generic mana, so on and so forth. But it has the ability pay 2 life or 2 generic mana. Counter target red or green spell. Any player may activate this ability. That's a mouthful for a card that says any player can stop red and green spells.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Holy cow. This is cumulative upkeep is a dirty word for a lot of people, right? Because that cost increases rapidly. However, there are a lot of enchantment decks that are fine with letting this enchantment be sacrificed to cumulative upkeep and then maybe use Hall of Heliod's Generosity, put it back on top of their library and play it again that same turn.
Yep.
But let's talk about that main feature. Pay 2 life. Counter target red or green spell, and any player may activate this ability. Mike, you're not playing this in your red or green deck, and wow, when the barrier to counter a spell is 2 life, I think you'll find that a lot of people will just counter pretty much everything.
What are red and green? We're not playing this spell. We're not playing that here anymore. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. This is kind of like Zur's Weirding, where anyone can pay 2 life to deny you a card draw. This is really going to lock down the game for your opponents. And sure, the ire is on the card, but most of it's going to be on the opponents who keep using it. They're not going to be like, oh my God, Mike, why are you using this card? It's going to be like, Alex, why do you keep countering all my spells? I'm like, don't blame me. The card lets me do it.
Yeah, I'm just doing this because I don't want you to get too far ahead. I'm sorry. Like,
this was printed way back in Alliances, 96.
It cost me 2 mana. It cost me 2 extra mana every turn just to have this around. I'm sorry.
200 blue decks, 209 blue decks. I don't think you would want to keep this out for more than a couple of turns without reanimating it. But during those turns, who's going to do some work? Who's going to even bother to play a red or green spell? Like, why would it's going to chill the whole table? Everyone's going to sit with their hands full.
Yeah, it's another really. This is a scary rattlesnake, considering that it's a picture of a whole bunch of crustaceans underneath the water.
And it's on the reserve list.
Yeah, it's on the reserve list at $2.11.
That's because nobody's bought it out yet. Someone will. Someone always does.
Day. Yeah. No, someone listening to this podcast.
Someone listening to this podcast may indeed buy this card out. Like
go get some investment. There you go. Yeah. Let's go ahead and move on here to Chris Goodhind. So we've interacted with Chris in our
What's
Discord.
Up, Chris?
He's also the one that recommended that we do the Piru deck tech. So he came back and he gave us another good gift of a couple of cards. Why don't you go ahead and talk to me about Maddening Imp?
Sure. Maddening Imp is 2 and a black, that's 3 mana, for a creature imp. It's a 1/1 with flying. And it has an activated ability, tap. Non-wall creatures the active player controls attack this turn if able. Active player is the player whose turn it currently is. At the beginning of the next end step, destroy each of those creatures that didn't attack this turn. Activate only during an opponent's turn and only before combat. Right, so forced combat works fine, right? Like we have talked about forced combat before. It's perfectly serviceable. This is fascinating, right? Because the main way that people deal with forced combat is they'll try to tap all their stuff down so it won't have to attack. If that happens here, all of those creatures are destroyed. This is a very on-demand, this very political card. You can say, like, listen, you might lose them through combat. You might lose them by them being destroyed. You don't want me to activate this on you. That's bad news.
Everything is terrible here. This is good. It's again, we love rattlesnakes, and this one, the art's a little terrifying. But other than that, I mean, it's got some evasion at the very least, but you're never going to attack with it. You know, it's a 3-mana 1/1. Make everybody attack. Or something terrible is going to happen.
Well, I think what's interesting is, right, you can only activate it on an opponent's turn, and I think that kind of has this built-in don't be an idiot thing, right? Because if you were allowed to activate this on your turn and you activated it, what would happen?
Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't be able to attack and it would destroy itself. So that'd be very silly.
Yep. I like that it's this isn't like Angel's Trumpet or any of the things where it talks about, you know, if it's tapped, it's fine. Right. This is
this says screw
attack.
You. If it didn't attack, I'm blaming it specifically.
Yep. I like that one a lot.
This card came back in Tempest in 1997. It's $2. And EDHREC says this card is in 346 decks, 0% of black decks.
Nice. Very nice. I think we might have talked about this next card that Chris gave us.
Yeah.
And if so, I don't care because it's worth talking about again. Mana Maze.
Yeah.
1 generic and a blue for an enchantment. Players can't play spells that share a color with the spell last played this turn. So if I cast a green spell, no one's casting a green spell until until another color spell has been cast, or until the turn ends.
Let's talk about the most common interaction that I envision, other than obviously monocolor players getting shut out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How about counter magic?
Yeah.
This basically says, in as many words, counter spells can't be countered because most counter spells are blue.
Well, it says that, and it also it says counter spells can't be countered unless it's one of the rare spells that isn't blue. And blue spells can't be countered. Because if
that's a good point. Blue spells can't be countered either. Yeah.
Like this is a ridiculously effective way to protect yourself as long as you are either planning on casting one spell a turn or you are not monocolored.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to play this in your mono blue deck, but in your blue plus deck that runs counterspells, it's a control style deck. This is punching way above its weight class at 2 mana.
You know the deck that I was thinking about for this one that I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I still want to lean into it. I kind of want to do the Braid show and tell with this in there. Because if the whole point of Braids is I'm going to cheat out some big stuff for free, I'm going to try and take other people's stuff, and I don't want them to be able to stop me from doing it. I think this card fits really good into that niche.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that is that you think that might allow them to find an out to this, but Braids doesn't let you play instants and sorceries without paying their mana cost. So unless you have a rare creature or artifact counterspell,
sure,
it's not really going to give your opponents any edge.
Oh, I think I kind of lean into that as far as if I'm trying to make the most efficient version of this. But for our purposes, I just like this card just because it means that there's a new game on top of the game where I guarantee if you play this, people are going to look at their hand and they're going to do my favorite thing, which is they start rearranging the cards in their hand to fit the sequence that they would have to cast things from that point on.
Yeah, Mike,
and I always like
Stacks
seeing
is,
that.
and this is a Stacks base.
It sure is. It sure is. Again, I'm leaning a little bit more into Stacks can be fun. You just have to get creative with it. And a couple of our friends out there in Discord and on Twitter have helped us out considerably in doing so. Good job, Chris.
This card is from Invasion back in 2000, and it's real cheap. It's around $4. EDHREC says it's in fewer than 700 decks. That's 0%.
Go. Let's move on to our last one with one of the OGs on the Discord from Minty. Let's talk about Avacyn, Guardian Angel.
The other Avacyn.
Other Avacyn. The lesser known, but
the other Avacyn.
Also really effective. Go ahead, Alex.
Sure, Mike. This is the only commander we're talking about today, as far as I...
Yeah.
Avacyn Guardian Angel. So 2 triple white, that's 5 mana, for a legendary creature angel, 5/4 with flying and vigilance, and she has 2 activated abilities. The first one is for 1 and a white, it's 2 mana. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to another target creature this turn by sources of the color of your choice. And the second one is pay 5 and double white, that's 7 mana. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to target player or planeswalker this turn by sources of the color of your choice. Now, usually when you're preventing damage, right, it's from the color of your choice or from the next source of your choice. Whatever it is, it's usually only going to protect you from one instance of that damage. But the interesting thing is that you can combine this with something like, I don't know, 8.5 Tails, and now you can say, okay, this has damage prevention from white, and that spell is now white, and your spell completely fizzles.
This is on-board save a player.
Yes.
This is on-board repeatable save a player.
Yeah. That is expensive, but, I mean, how expensive is too expensive to save someone's life?
I mean, even if it's just... I mean, heck, half the time, you're going to be able to do a whole lot of work with the first ability for...
Yeah, saving someone's commander, their key creature, their utility creature for 2 mana. Let's strike a deal. Like, wow, they're about to spot remove that. We can make that not happen.
Yeah, plus, let's be real. A 5 mana, 5/4 flying vigilant legendary creature, it's going to stick around, too.
Yeah.
Like,
this Nobody's is another one of those... looking at this like, oh my god, they're so powerful. Nobody cares about this.
Do you know when someone cares about this and says they have to remove it? After it's been used multiple times to save the person that you're removing it from or somebody else. So at that point, this becomes a problem after it's been established that it's been a problem for a lot longer than that. And that's, again, it sticks around and is useful. That's the kind of stuff that I like. So that's a really good pick by Minty.
Yeah, this came out in M15, pretty recent, back in 2014. It's 63 cents. And I think everyone forgot about this card, Mike, because it's in 16 decks. Mm-hmm. Or sorry, it's at the helm of 16 decks.
Okay, I was going to say, hold on.
In the 99, it's in under 1,000 decks.
Okay, that's still not a lot. I mean, granted,
nobody is playing this as a commander. But yeah, literally nobody.
Yeah, I might make that a commander deck. It's a 16-cent commander, or 63-cent commander. Yeah. I like that. I'll make a budget deck. There we go. So I'll tell you what, Alex. I'm going to ask you a question here, and I'll go first. And I won't pick the one that I think you would pick, despite the fact that that's probably my favorite. Of the cards that we talked about today, which one do you think is your favorite? I think I'm leaning towards Tangleroot. Just because 3 generic for an artifact that whenever a player casts a creature spell, they get a green. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. No, everybody's going to go fast. Everybody's going to get stuff. Even if you're not playing green, it's still a generic mana that you can use for stuff. That's pretty cool. And it's a 78-cent card. So yeah. I'm leaning into that. I like that card a lot. What about you?
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I think you already know from me that the answer is going to be Lifeline.
I avoided it on purpose.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This card is powerful in every sense of the word. It's the fact that this card is in our episode about underplayed cards. Even if you don't give two craps about group hug or politics, which, why are you listening? I mean, thank you for listening, but why?
You might, maybe they just like us, Alex. It's okay.
We appreciate you tuning in. Even if you don't care about that, this card is absurdly powerful. And then when you add the social aspect on top of it, that you actually get to give other people their creatures back.
Yep.
I mean, how can it be beat?
This card can be a win condition. In most decks that it's in, it probably is a win condition.
Seriously, I mean, I've played this in Second War. I've sacked my entire board. It all comes back. I get a ton of tokens. All my creatures come back. I get all their ETBs. And then what are they going to do? Attack into me? On their end step, I'll do it again. I'll sack my whole board. To Ashnod's Altar, I'll generate twice as much mana as before. I mean, oh my gosh. Any altar, any instant speed sacrifice permanent that nets you a resource, mana, life, mill with delirium, or alter dementia, excuse me.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. This, and talk about like aristocrats decks. Talk about, who's our classic, brawl commander? What's his name? He's in Jund.
Oh, Thantis.
No. It's silly.
Corvold.
Thank you. Yeah. Corvold deck, and pretty much any deck that works anything like Corvold, which is a lot of decks. This card is a powerhouse. When I say win condition, obviously, most of the time it's not going to win on the spot, but the amount of value it grinds out turn over turn demands immediate removal. But who the hell would want to remove this when this protects their entire board? Mike, this card is immaculate. I would recommend everybody play this card.
Every time a card can stick around because it does something that's a problem, but it's fine until the point where it needs to be removed.
Wait a second. Mike just reanimated 20 of his creatures in the past 2 turns, and he's going to win this turn.
Yep. Yeah, that's usually when it gets removed. It's like, no, it's too late.
It's too late now.
Sorry. Well, Alex, if anybody had any questions for how any of these cards interact with each other, or how they interact with some other cards, how would they be able to find you?
For sure, Mike. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Lappermedic. That's LAPPERMEDIC. Or you can email me privately at alex@edhrec.com. Or just come in our Discord. Mike, where is that again?
So we're going to include a link for our show in the show notes to be able to come join us in the Discord and talk with us about all the cool stuff. Like I said, we also had a lot of people talk to us on Twitter for some of these cards, and you can find us on Twitter at EDH_social. You can also, if you wanted to pick up any of these cards, and you should, because a vast majority of them are either very inexpensive or they're on the reserve list, so they're probably only going to climb in value. We'll put our link for TCG Player, our affiliate, so you can go there and you can buy all the cards that you would normally buy. You can click on that link, our bit.ly/EDH_social link, and for there, you'll be able to get all these cards. You'll get a little bit of help to us, and it doesn't cost you anything. So, hey, look at that. Another reason to buy Magic cards, because, man, don't we need more of them. Alex, absolute awesome time hanging out with you this week.
Yeah, Mike, it was a real pleasure. And thank you to everyone on Twitter and especially all of our listeners who contributed cards to this Ooh, Can I See That special episode. And a very special thank you to Dana Roach.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do this once every few episodes here, because there's definitely a whole lot of Magic cards.
Every other episode.
You know what? We could do it. There's that many cards.
Let's not go overboard.
No, let's not, because next episode we're going to be answering another deck tech from somebody who wrote into the podcast, and we're going to make a group hug deck out of a commander that, to Alex and I, it absolutely screamed group hug when it came out. And to everybody else, it probably screamed something much, much more aggressive.
Yeah, that's the problem with these commanders, isn't it?
No, right? But we'll work on that one episode at a time. Until then, we'll see y'all next week.